Lo primero que tengo que aclarar.
I must begin by making the following crystal clear. Prices are determined in the market as a result of a social process fueled by entrepreneurship. This is obvious, but we need to repeat it, because the vast majority of my colleagues, economics professors and department heads, present the determination of prices as if it resulted from the intersection of mysterious curves or functions, etc. I will present a radically different analysis or explanation of how prices are set in the market. I am going to describe a social process led by flesh and blood men and women who are endowed with an innate entrepreneurial capacity. We cannot possibly understand how prices are determined if we do not first have a sound grasp of the nature of entrepreneurship. That is why we have devoted so much time and effort to studying it analytically. Well, we saw that in a system based on the division of knowledge or labor, an incredibly powerful force leads us to make exchanges, because in keeping with the law of marginal utility, each person values very little what he already has, and what he has specialized in producing, and he values very highly what he lacks and others have. So we are more or less destined to make exchanges with each other. In addition, we saw that society, the market, is a process, an extremely complex network of human interactions, which basically consist of exchange relationships. Well, we are going to study 4 different types of exchange processes that give rise to monetary prices, and we will go from the simplest case to the broadest and most general case. The simplest case is that of an isolated exchange. Next, we'll consider one-sided competition among buyers. For example, an auction, to give you a clear visual idea. Then we'll look at one-sided competition among sellers. And last, we'll study two-sided competition.
In honor of Böhm-Bawerk, let us consider the same market he does in his classic work Capital and Interest. Böhm-Bawerk looks at a market for horses, where presumably there are buyers and sellers interested in buying and selling horses, viewed as a scarce and also homogeneous economic good. At the time he was writing, horses were the standard means of transportation. It would be like looking at the car market today. Okay, now let us recall the essential lesson from the other day about the circumstances conducive to exchanges. For any exchange to take place, there must be inequality in opposite subjective valuations between the parties who will potentially close the deal. So we will imagine the following scenario. There are 2 economic agents, 2 gentlemen, Mr. A and Mr. B. Well, Mr. A does not have a horse and is thinking of buying one. The subjective valuations on his value scale are as follows. He subjectively values the horse he does not have more than 300 monetary units he does have. Let's say, for example, that I'm Mr. A and I want to buy a horse, and the following condition exists in me. I subjectively value, and you know that subjective valuations can only be compared, they are not a cardinal dimension which can be measured. Anyway, 300 euros, or monetary units of whatever currency, are worth less to me than the horse I want to buy. Thus, my question is, if this condition exists in me, if I value the horse I want to buy more than 300 monetary units, do I value the horse more than 299? And more than 250? Obviously. And more than 200? Yes? Pero vamos a suponer que el límite máximo en el que llego hasta
But let's suppose that the upper limit, the maximum amount at which the money, the monetary units, are worth less to me than the horse, is 300. Because if I add one more monetary unit, 301, then the scales are reversed. Well, if this inequality in subjective valuations exists in me, we will summarize it by saying that Mr. A values at 300 monetary units the horse he wants to buy. In today's class, and from this point on, when I say Mr. A values the horse at 300, you must associate that with these 2 inequalities in subjective valuations.
To put it another way, the potential buyer of the horse is willing to pay up to 300 monetary units, but no more. Okay? Now, we are going to suppose there is a potential seller of the horse, someone, Mr. B, who has a horse. Well, it turns out that 100 monetary units, which he lacks, are subjectively worth more to him than the horse. Now, the inverse of the question I asked before is this. If 100 monetary units are worth more to him than the horse he has, are 110 monetary units worth more? Yes. How about 150 or 200? But we will suppose that the lower limit is 100 monetary units. That is, if one unit is subtracted, 99, then the balance shifts. Man, 99 euros I don't have are worth less to me than the horse. If these two inequalities in subjective valuations exist in Mr. B, the potential seller, we will say that he values his horse at 100. To put it another way, he is willing to sell it for 100 monetary units, but not for less.
Bueno, pues vamos a estudiar ahora el primer caso, que es el que tenemos que entender bien.
Well, now we are going to consider the first case, which we must understand well, and that is the case of price determination in an isolated exchange. An isolated exchange is one which involves only one potential buyer and only one potential seller. Let us ask ourselves the following question. If these inequalities in subjective valuations exist in the minds of Mr. A and Mr. B, in short, if Mr. A is willing to pay up to 300 monetary units for the horse he wants to buy, and Mr. B, who has the horse, is willing to sell it for 100 or more, the first question we could ask ourselves is, will an exchange take place? What was the necessary condition for an exchange to occur? We said that there must be inequality in opposite subjective valuations, that each party must attach a higher subjective value to what he lacks and the other party has than what he has and expects to give in the exchange. Does that situation exist here? Obviously it does. So the first condition for an exchange to occur is met. There is inequality in subjective valuations here. In short, Mr. A is very eager to buy the horse, and he is willing to offer a lot, up to 300 monetary units. And Mr. B is very eager to obtain monetary units. He is willing to sell his horse for even as little as 100 monetary units. There is inequality in subjective valuations, and hence the first necessary condition for an exchange to occur is already met. However, there is a second essential condition, our good friend entrepreneurship, which is represented by the entrepreneurial light bulb. Both parties must recognize the profit opportunity. They must realize they both come out ahead if they reach a deal, for in a society based on contractual ties, exchanges are voluntary, and they take place if and only if both parties benefit from a deal. Here it is clear that they stand to benefit, because an inequality in subjective valuations exists, but the parties must notice the profit opportunity, detect it, recognize it, discover it, seize it entrepreneurially, realize there is a profit opportunity, and then swing into action. What does action consist of? It consists precisely of closing the deal. So the answer to the first question is, yes, an exchange will take place, because there is inequality in subjective valuations, as long as the parties are alert enough from an entrepreneurial standpoint to recognize that profit opportunity. Now, what is the second question we could ask ourselves? At what price will the deal be closed? Maybe to answer this question, at what price the deal will be closed, we could split it into two different questions. I ask you, could this deal be closed at a price higher than 300 monetary units per horse? Obviously not, because the potential buyer is willing to pay up to 300 monetary units, but no more. Next question. Could the deal be closed at a price lower than 100 monetary units? The answer is no again, this time because of the seller, who is willing to sell a horse for 100 monetary units or more, but for no less. Well, all we can say as economists, in terms of economic theory, is that in an isolated exchange, under these circumstances, the deal will be closed, and at a price somewhere between 100 monetary units, the subjective valuation the potential seller makes of the horse, and 300 monetary units, the subjective valuation the potential buyer makes of the horse. The most we can say is that clearly a deal will be reached if the parties entrepreneurially discover the profit opportunity, because there is inequality in opposite subjective valuations, and that the price will be between 100 and 300, between the subjective valuations the potential seller makes and the subjective valuation the potential buyer makes. Within the broad range between 100 and 300, where specifically will the price be set? We cannot say a priori in terms of economic theory. The most we can say is that it will depend on the shrewdness and entrepreneurial capacity of each person involved in the deal, on the entrepreneurial and negotiating ability of each of the people who take part in the exchange. If the capacity of both is more or less similar, we could theorize, form a hypothesis that the price will lie about halfway between 100 and 300, 200 monetary units for example, but there is no guarantee.
Vamos a poner primero el caso del...
Let us begin by considering a case in which a marked inequality exists in the entrepreneurial and negotiating abilities of the two parties. We will think of the housing market. Let us imagine a house and a widow whose husband has just died in a tragic accident. It happened just 2 weeks ago, and he has left the widow with 3 small children, and also with a mortgage and a huge loan he took out for his company. The loan must be repaid within the next 2 weeks, or the widow's property will be seized. In short, the widow is in a desperate situation. She has to sell the house somehow. She is the potential seller of the house. Everyone can imagine those circumstances, right? Okay. Now, suppose I am walking through the neighborhood and I see the house and I say to myself, hey, this is the house I was born in. I spent my childhood here. How I would love to own it. What I wouldn't give to buy it. I'd give anything. I spent the happiest years of my life here. I am the potential buyer and I am terribly interested in the house. Notice that we are creating this hypothetical situation and contrasting the circumstances of the potential buyer, who is extremely excited about the house, with those of the seller, who is desperate. Well, we're going to look at different scenarios. Let's imagine I say to myself, I'll go right over there and see if there's any chance, but I'd better not get my hopes up. There probably won't be. Whoever lives there probably doesn't want to sell it. And why would they? That would be an unusual stroke of luck. Anyway, I'll ring the bell. Ding dong! What do you think will happen if I am a real expert in the business world, and I do not rush, I keep my cool, and I think, let's just see what happens, what the atmosphere is like. I certainly won't put all my cards on the table right off. I'll just ask a casual question or two. What will happen if the widow has no negotiating ability or entrepreneurial spirit? Or if that day she just feels clumsy and she opens the door in tears, dressed all in black, with a desperate, shaken look on her face. Oh, yes? Hello, good afternoon. Is this a bad time? Boo-hoo-hoo. What's wrong, Mom? Boo-hoo. My husband died 2 weeks ago. He did? Oh dear, I'm so sorry. I would not have intruded on you if I had known. No, come in. Would you like something to drink? No, Mama, I don't want to disturb you. I simply couldn't. Oh, you can't imagine what I'm facing. My husband has just died. The bank is threatening foreclosure, and I have to pay back a loan as quickly as possible. I'm in a desperate situation. Now, if I have a minimum of negotiating ability, what do you think will happen? What direction do you think the price will go in if this poor woman is so clumsy? I'll say, oh no, oh dear, you poor thing, What a terrible situation. I was just passing by, and I stopped because I got lost. All a lie. And I was hoping to ask directions. So, you say your situation is desperate? Oh dear, you poor thing. How much is it you need? Well, the mortgage is 50 monetary units, and the loan is another 50, so 100 would get me out of this mess. 100? Hell, I was ready to pay 3 times that much, 300 monetary units, and she says 100 would get her out of her mess. I've got her. So I say to her, what a shame. Well, I'll be going, Mum. Best of luck. What a shame. I've won the lottery. You know, actually, I'd try to pretend a little. Wouldn't want to be too obvious. You know, I really feel for you. Maybe I could help you out. Maybe even find somebody. You say you need 100. Well, maybe... Oh, I don't know. I just might be able to find somebody willing to pay 100. But then again, the market looks pretty bad. I really don't think we'll find anybody. Boo-hoo-hoo! And then, finally, well, look, I think I can afford it myself. 100 monetary units. I reel her in and we sign the agreement. Note the glaring imbalance in negotiating ability. So, given the potential seller's clumsiness at negotiating, the price will tend toward 100 monetary units. Remember, it cannot be less than 100, because then the deal will not be closed. A deal always means both parties come out ahead. Still, the needle on the scale, the price, will tend to move toward the lower limit. Actually, for people in the widow's situation, the smart thing to do is exactly the opposite. If you desperately need to sell, the cardinal rule, and you can learn nothing more practical in an economics class, is not to show you are desperate to sell. So, what the widow should do is to put on her most elegant, colourful suit, keep a stiff upper lip, shed no tears in front of others, go get her hair done with the money she has left, make herself up well, and avoid showing she has any urgent need to sell. Observe how radically different the scenario is if I ring the bell, ding dong, and I see this lovely woman. Hello, how do you do, Ma'am? You see, I was just passing by and... Oh, you'll never believe it. What is it? It's love at first sight. What do you mean, love at first sight? Well, you see, I was born in this house. You don't say. And how long ago was that? I bought the house 10 years ago. It was 25 years ago, and you just can't imagine. It would make me so happy to... At this point, the widow is thinking, here's my chance. Also, it turns out I won the lottery not too long ago. And well, I'm actually looking to buy a house, and my dream would be to buy this one. Now the widow thinks, good heavens, I'm the one who's won the lottery. This is my buyer. Indeed. Notice how things are reversed now. She does not let on. She's a sharp entrepreneur. She keeps a stiff upper lip. The visitor is the one acting naive and putting all his cards on the table. So, now what direction do you think the price will go in? The widow will say, well, that's nice. If you'd like, I can show you around the house. But please understand, this is very unusual. You've arrived out of the blue. I love this house, and I'm not thinking of moving. That's all a lie. She wants to sell it. Moving is the furthest thing from my mind, and with the way things are right now, I really don't want to move. Won't you reconsider, Ma'am? I will be willing to pay you a large sum of money. No, no. Even if you promise me the moon, I am not interested in selling. What a rotten lie. She's willing to sell it for 100. Oh, what a shame. Listen, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. And then, as he is leaving, the lady says to him, as if doing him a favor, wait, you've touched my heart. I can see you're a good person, and if it means that much to you, perhaps I could think it over. But no, I really don't want to sell. No, wait, I can offer you up to 300. In this case, with the negotiating roles reversed, notice the direction the price has gone. The needle on the scale has moved to 300. If both parties are good negotiators, we would expect the deal to be closed at a price more or less in the middle. Another typical example is that of used car salesmen. I will never forget something that happened to my father. My parents were thinking about buying a car. I was very little, and I overheard the typical conversations at home. Well, I've just seen this model. I like that model, etc. So, my father made his decision and he went to the dealership. But he made a terrible mistake. He said to me, since you're so excited about it, why don't you come along? Well, here's what happened. My father walked onto the lot, and my dad, who knew what he was doing, liked a certain red car. But he didn't walk over to the red car. He walked over to a different car. Immediately, the salesman came out. Ching! There is no one more alert, no one more slicker than a used car salesman. He immediately said, "What can I do for you, sir?" My dad said, "Ah, I was just passing by. In fact, I don't even really need a car. I've already got 3 or 4 at home. But I saw you might have something interesting over there, and I thought, well, I'll just go over and take a look." Meanwhile, I was thinking, what is Dad talking about? He's been telling everybody at home, and everybody knows perfectly well that he really wants to buy that car. But I kept quiet for the moment. Then my father went over to another car, and he started asking questions. "What about this one?" "Ah, well, I could get you behind the wheel of this one for only blah blah blah." So my father walked around and asked about several different cars before he got to the one he was really interested in. Then, without giving himself away, he said, "And this one? Oh, good grief, this one is way too expensive. It's out of the question. I'm not interested." And that's when I jumped in and made a mess of things. I was 4, and I said, "But Daddy, didn't you say at home that this is the car you wanted to buy?" Well, the salesman saw his chance then, and said to himself, "What a wise guy. Now I've got him." I think my father ended up paying a lot more for the car because he took the kid along.